Have you ever noticed how some moments in your life feel charged, almost heavier than they should, as if something invisible just passed through you and left a trace behind? Maybe it happens in ordinary situations, standing in line, driving home, checking your phone, when a sudden sense of repetition, coincidence, or quiet discomfort appears, not dramatic enough to name, but strong enough that you pause and think, something here doesn't quite add up. You're not imagining chaos or looking for meaning where none exists. It's more subtle than that. It's the feeling that reality is operating on a deeper layer than the one you're usually allowed to see, and that this layer somehow knows you're paying attention. Most people ignore these moments. They brush them off as stress, coincidence, or overthinking, because acknowledging them would require admitting that the surface explanation of life might be incomplete. But what if those fleeting sensations are not errors in your mind, but brief contacts with a hidden reality, signals that your quantum consciousness is brushing against something it doesn't fully understand yet? If that's true, then the patterns you've been living inside, including how abundance seems to move toward some people and away from others, may not be random at all. And if there really is a hidden energy shaping prosperity beneath the surface of everyday life, the question isn't whether it exists, it's whether you've already felt it, without realizing what it was, and what it might mean if you stop looking away now. If any part of that felt familiar, there's no need to react outwardly. A simple pause is already a form of recognition. Some people mark these moments quietly, almost as a way of saying to themselves, "I see this." Others choose to stay close to conversations that don't rush to conclusions, but unfold slowly, layer by layer, over time. If you're still here, take a second and let the thought continue in your own words. You might write something that begins with, "I noticed that, I've been sensing," or "this made me realize," not as a statement for anyone else, but as a way to capture what just surfaced. Because what comes next isn't speculation or belief. It's grounded in an experiment that challenged how scientists understand reality itself. And once you see it, these quiet moments won't feel accidental anymore. What comes next isn't philosophy or metaphor. In 1979, at the University of Paris, physicist Alain Aspect conducted a series of experiments that quietly disrupted one of the most basic assumptions about reality. Working with pairs of entangled photons, Aspect demonstrated that the behavior of one particle changed instantly when the other was measured, even when they were separated by distances that ruled out any classical signal between them. This wasn't a flaw in the equipment or a statistical anomaly. It was a controlled experiment showing that observation itself played a role in how physical systems behaved. Later, this would become widely associated with what we now call the observer effect. But at the time, it forced physicists to confront an uncomfortable idea. Reality does not fully settle into form until it is observed. You don't need to follow the equations to feel the weight of this. Imagine a system that exists in multiple possible states, suspended in uncertainty, until the act of measurement collapses it into one outcome. That collapse doesn't come from force or energy in the traditional sense, but from interaction, from relationship. In quantum terms, the field holds possibilities, not certainties, and observation selects among them. And this means that you are not merely moving through a fixed world, but interacting with a quantum field that responds to attention, context, and participation at levels far below conscious awareness. Psychologically, this resonates in ways people rarely connect to physics. That subtle sense that certain opportunities only appear when you're internally aligned, or that moments of clarity seem to reorganize how events unfold afterward, mirrors the same structure. Potential becoming actual through interaction. This isn't about controlling reality or manifesting outcomes. It's about recognizing that consciousness expansion changes how you relate to what's already there, altering which possibilities you notice, engage with, or dismiss. But here's where the fracture deepens. If observation plays a role in shaping outcomes at the most fundamental level of matter, then attention is not neutral, and the next question becomes unavoidable. What happens when the observer itself is part of the system being observed? In the early 1990s, neuroscientists and physicists working with the HeartMath Institute began studying a phenomenon that had little to do with belief and everything to do with measurable coherence. They observed that the human nervous system does not operate in isolation. Under certain conditions, The heart, brain, and surrounding electromagnetic field enter a state of synchronization, a measurable pattern of coherence that changes how information is processed internally. This wasn't framed as mysticism, but as signal clarity. When internal systems fall into coherence, noise drops and perception sharpens. And this explains why moments of sudden intuition or clarity often arrive not during effort, but during stillness, when the system briefly aligns instead of fragments. You may have felt this without naming it. A quiet pause where your breathing slows, your thoughts momentarily thin out, and something feels clear without words. Not emotional excitement, but a neutral silence where decisions feel simpler, where attention stabilizes instead of jumping. That bodily sensation isn't insight itself. It's the nervous system reducing interference. In that state, information that was always present becomes noticeable. The body isn't receiving something new. It's finally coherent enough to register what was already there. From a scientific perspective, coherence changes how signals propagate through a field. In physics, coherent systems transmit information efficiently, while incoherent systems dissipate it. Applied to perception, this means that your experience of reality depends less on what exists out there, and more on how internally aligned you are with the signals you're already immersed in. The quantum field doesn't suddenly appear when coherence emerges. It becomes legible. And this explains why expanded awareness often feels subtle rather than dramatic, like something clicking into place instead of something being added. But there's a cost to recognizing this. Once you notice how much of your perception depends on internal alignment, it becomes harder to blame randomness, distraction, or external chaos for everything you experience. Coherence brings clarity, but clarity removes excuses, and not everyone is ready for what becomes visible when the noise finally drops. There's a part of this that rarely gets said out loud. When perception sharpens and the noise drops, something else often follows. A quiet sense of separation. Not because you've changed your life dramatically, but because the way you experience it no longer matches the surface-level conversations around you. You may find yourself noticing pauses others rush past, questioning assumptions that once felt solid, or feeling oddly out of sync in rooms where nothing appears wrong. That distance can feel like solitude, even when you're surrounded by people. Doubt shows up too, but not the loud kind. It's the subtle questioning of your own reactions, the hesitation before sharing what you've noticed, the instinct to stay silent rather than explain something you can't fully translate. There's a strange weight in realizing that awareness doesn't automatically bring certainty. It often brings responsibility. You become aware of patterns, choices, and signals you once ignored, and that awareness can make old habits feel uncomfortable without offering immediate replacements. This is where many people quietly pull back, not because they're afraid of truth, but because clarity removes the comfort of autopilot. Feeling different isn't flattering here, it's disorienting. It can feel like standing between worlds, no longer satisfied with surface explanations, but not interested in dramatic belief systems either. Just present, alert, and unsure where that leaves you. And yet this tension points to something essential. The discomfort isn't a failure of understanding, it's a sign that perception has outgrown old frameworks. What matters now isn't fixing that feeling, but recognizing what it's preparing you to see next. Because the final piece doesn't resolve the uncertainty, it reorganizes it. When you step back and look at everything that's unfolded so far, a different picture begins to form. The feeling of being different no longer sits in the same place it once did. What initially felt like misalignment or flaw starts to resemble sensitivity, not emotional fragility, but perceptual range. The experiments we touched, from observation shaping outcomes to coherence, altering how information becomes visible, point to the same quiet conclusion. Reality does not present itself equally to every state of awareness. The difference isn't in the world itself, but in how finely it is being registered. Emotionally, this reframes the discomfort you've felt. The solitude, the hesitation, the sense of standing slightly outside the flow, they aren't signs that something is wrong with you. They're byproducts of noticing layers that don't announce themselves loudly. Psychologically, once attention sharpens, it becomes harder to fully inhabit simplified explanations. Scientifically, Once coherence increases, more signal gets through. These two movements mirror each other more than most people realize. But here's the unsettling part. If consciousness plays a role not just in interpreting reality, but in how possibilities organize themselves, then awareness isn't passive. It participates, not by force, belief, or intention, but by alignment. That raises a question science hasn't answered yet and maybe can't. Whether consciousness is something the universe produces or something the universe uses to know itself. The more closely you look, the less clear that boundary becomes. This isn't a conclusion you settle into. It's a threshold. Once you see that perception itself may be a variable, not a constant, the idea of going back to unconscious certainty quietly dissolves. There's something ahead of this understanding, not louder, not more dramatic, but deeper. And whatever it is, it doesn't arrive all at once. It waits for the next step. What matters now isn't reaching a final answer. It's recognizing that your attention no longer feels the same as it did when this began. The patterns are quieter, but more ordered. The uncertainty hasn't vanished. It has become more precise. If continuing this kind of exploration feels natural to you, not as entertainment, but as an ongoing refinement of perception, then staying connected makes sense. Not to accumulate conclusions, but to remain present as understanding deepens. The next step in this sequence is already unfolding in the sixth step, the gateway to the expansion of consciousness, where this line of inquiry moves further, not outward, but inward, toward the structure behind awareness itself. Your consciousness brought you here. What happens now is your choice.